This is Pastor George Thompson. I'm your host of the Christian Stewardship Network. Right now, we're at the CSN Forum, and we just got out of a session that was taught by Steve Carter. Steve, you did an excellent job, and he talked about just reaching the next generation, and we just want to talk about it. But welcome today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your church?
Thanks, George. Yeah, I'm from Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm stewardship pastor there. Been doing that about 2-3 years, having a blast.
Amen. But it has been a blessing. Today you talked about reaching the next generation. So, hey, can you tell me a little bit about millennials and the next generation?
Yeah, just a couple of years ago, the millennials became the largest population living in America, passed up the baby boomers.
Passed the baby boomers.
So if we as a church don't pay attention to them, then we're going to get overtaken by them, I think.
That's right,
And
yes.
So, and in stewardship ministry, we want to make sure that we reach them just like we have the previous generation. And so our hearts are for them. The millennials are anybody who's 18 to 34 years old today.
18, oh. I just missed.
You just missed?
I just missed the millennials.
Me too, George.
Right,
I'm not quite a millennial
It's okay,
either.
but I want to be in the group. But let's a little bit more about millennials and then the next group.
Yeah, the next group is Gen Z, is what they're calling them.
Right.
These are the kids that are 18 years and younger,
Right.
And they're going to be a unique group as well for us to be able to reach, and we got to start thinking about that now.
Right.
But millennials grew up in this sort of technology age, right?
Yes.
They've always had access to personal computers in their home,
Right.
the internet. They started out on Facebook and all kinds of forms of social media in their teenage years,
Right.
and so this has just been sort of normative to them. They experienced online dating.
Right.
They used apps on their phones.
And
so it's just
Facebook relationships.
Right,
Yeah,
and
like
Facebook
like you're in a relationship or it's complicated. It's all out there now. We just have to have a megaphone and say something.
Yeah.
Now you can just shout it out on Facebook.
Yeah, that's
Right.
exactly right. But another thing about the millennials, they're not just about how technology centric they are and how savvy they are at handling all this rapidly changing technology, but it's also their hearts are towards social causes. They're very socially driven, social justice driven, and they're very generous. They're generous with their time, with their money to an extent. In their minds, they are, and they, will do things like share about their favorite causes on Facebook and try to get other people and influence them to support those causes. They do things like buy shoes from Tom's because they know that Tom's is going to give another pair to a child in poverty, and so they have this sort of sense of being cause-driven and wanting to having a more generous heart in a lot of ways.
Right, that's really good. And then what's the next generation called?
Gen Z, right?
Gen Z.
Yeah.
Oh, so we went from A all the way to Z.
Yeah, well,
we went from the boomers all the way to Z.
Yeah, there's a lot of different names that they give them,
Right.
but the millennials were at one time called Generation Y, and that's why they call them Gen Z. I don't know what the next one's going to be.
Yeah, well, we went to Z already.
We've run out of
We're
alphabet.
going to go back to A.
Yeah.
All right, good. So you brought up, and you had 7 things that millennials and Generation Z had. And by the way, we'll also have slides and we'll have more information about this on our website. So you want to go to christianstewardshipnetwork.com. But there were 7 aspects.
Yeah, first aspect is really kind of what I'm talking about here is how we're going to see a shift in the way that the millennials are today and what we're going to see in Gen Z. And so the first shift I talked about was that we're going to see a shift from confidence to caution. See, millennials grew up in a booming economy, right? And it was, the dot-com era, and they, listened to boy bands on the radio, and they had soccer moms that took care of everything in their life. And so they're very optimistic and have had everything handed to them, and they're just, life is good, right?
Right.
So now we've got a generation that's grown up in the last 10 years or so, and they've experienced an economic recession pretty hard. They've seen terrorism come onto our land. They've seen racial injustice and dealt with things like gender issues and all kinds of things that are causing them to see life with a little more reality. And so they're more cautious. So moving from confidence to caution. The second one is moving from idealism into pragmatism, right? So for some of the same reasons that we talked about before, millennials, they were very, idealistic in their view of the world. Life is good, and they've always had everything they've ever wanted, right? You know, they grew up getting the next new iPhone and, you know, the Abercrombie and Fitch jeans that they wanted to wear, and they turned 16, they got a Mini Cooper, right? So they had access to so many things, but Gen Z has not had that same experience. Money's been a little tighter since the economic recession, and they're starting to see their older brothers and sisters move back into the home, and so there's a 400% increase in multi-generational households these days, right? And so their situation is far different. So they are not quite as idealistic. In fact, they're a little more cynical about the world and their view of it.
Gotcha.
So third thing, right?
Third thing.
They are morphing from attaining an education, the millennials, they were all about that, to hacking an education. That's what I called it today.
Attaining hacking.
Attaining to hacking an
What's the
education.
difference?
So the millennial grew up and their parents said to them, now if you want to be successful, you've got to go off to college and get an education. And so that's what they all did. That's what they knew to do. So they graduated high school, and almost 100% of them went off and got a 4-year degree at a university.
Right.
The reality is they all ended up back home living in their mom's basement and working at Starbucks and not being able to get the careers that they had. So their younger siblings, the teenagers, have seen all this go before them, and they're looking at this going, you know what, I don't know that I want to go into a mound of student loan debt, come out of college and not really have anything. I want to go after my career differently. So they're starting to look at how they can kind of hack that education and get
it more inexpensively, it appears, too.
Yeah, maybe
there's certain
online
jobs, like you said, certain people that they offer you education. There's certain things. Hey, you know what? And we're hearing in California, you know, there's schools, like school I went to now. I went to speak there recently. It costs $70,000 a year to go there. So, like, there's certain things that you want to look at where you say, hey, you know what? Maybe I go to community college for 2 years and do this first, or do certain on-the-job training. Or if I work here, maybe they'll also have more information towards our education in these areas.
And I think for us in stewardship ministry, that's a positive thing. We
Very
should embrace,
big opportunity.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Hey, I'm Pastor George, your host with the Christian Stewardship Network. I'm here with Steve Carter, and we're talking about reaching the next generation if you just tuned in. Now we're going to go to number 4. Steve.
Number 4 is one that we'll all enjoy as stewardship pastors, right? Yes. They're morphing from spending money, the millennials, into saving money. A recent study.
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, I'm telling you.
I want to make sure I heard that.
From spending money to saving money. This next generation, the Gen Zs, are a little more cautious in their approach to money. They want to make sure that they have some and are prepared for their life in a way that the millennials didn't really think they were going to need to do. Because again, they had everything handed to them on a plate. They were entitled to have everything that they wanted. And so this next generation looks at life differently, and they're starting to save. In fact, a recent report said that 57% of all Gen Z prefers saving money over spending money. And for a young person to say that, that's a pretty big deal.
Right. And you know what we're noticing? We made a new word up. It's called save besting. Is because kids are actually not saving money in the bank. You know, if you look at what interest rates and what they're paying right now at banks, they're learning, they want to know more about investing. It's very shocking. One day we're going to figure out how to get a hold of the people. But what happens now, we're doing classes, we see younger people coming in and learning about investing. But they don't give us their email. They just show up. And then they just go back off into the weeds. We never see them again. Then they'll just come back again. We're going to figure out how to communicate with them later on and do a social media.
We're going
to figure out how to reach them, you know, but just I guess they don't use the email system. At first I thought it was just regular mail.
They're on Snapchat.
But there's I got to get on there and send a GIF, I guess. But one of the things that we're noticing is that the way they view money also in those areas is a little bit different.
They are.
But that's good.
They are. And you know, another little trend in that same area, George, is I did talk about today, but they are finding Gen Z to be a little more entrepreneurial. Even in their young years, they're finding ways to, you know, earn and make money in an entrepreneurial way. And I think that'll kind of blend into hacking this education the way they're going to do that.
And they look at the world differently because of the internet. They aren't looking for, like when we grew up, you know, you kind of hung around the people in your neighborhood. Now you can reach out further because of all the technology in these areas. That's right. That's great. And you talked about that. Good.
So number 5 is consuming media is what millennials were all about, right? They just were on social media all the time. They're watching hours and hours. They were the generation that made it popular to binge watch Netflix, right? And YouTube and all those sort of things. And the Gen Zers are shifting a little bit from that. They are a little more into creating their own media, right? So they're accustomed to having their smartphones and filming things and creating things and then putting it out there for others to see. You see things in social media channels now like Facebook and Instagram where they're making stories and doing Facebook Live and creating their own media. It doesn't mean they don't also consume a lot of media, they do, but they're adding to that a whole lot of creating media, which, you know, is an interesting aspect of this group. They want to create things and participate and be involved, and in our stewardship ministry, we've got to figure out how can we get them engaged and allow them to do that in some way, get their hands on what we're trying to teach.
Right, and later on, I want to make sure that we cover how we want to reach them, because right now, that is such an opportunity, because YouTube is free. You can publish, you can do things, and we want to make sure we cover that so we understand that if you're running a stewardship ministry or you're involved, how that you can take applicable things that we're going over today and start to reach that generation. Number 6.
Number 6 is that viral messages are moving into vanishing messages. So
I can't go viral no more?
you can't, well, you can, George, if you want to.
I was trying to go viral, now I got to go private?
You're not a millennial, so you're
Oh,
good.
okay,
so,
I'm good. I'll try that.
But the millennials loved that part of social media, right? When they were on Facebook and Twitter, they were all about getting the most likes or the most shares, and they wanted their things to go viral. But their younger siblings, the Gen Z, have been watching all of that, and they realize what's happening there is that their future employers are seeing some of the stuff they're putting out there, and they're not getting the jobs that they need, or their parents are watching, right? Because their parents are now all on social media, and they weren't originally. So the millennials were real happy about this, but now they're starting to become more and more shy about being tracked, you know, on there, and so they are choosing to go with social media like Snapchat and Whisper and other apps where things vanish after a period of time.
I've heard of Whisper before. Whisper.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it either. So.
we are millennials.
I'm not
but
a
what you're
millennial.
saying is they're saying that now is at some point you're saying Facebook will be for older people.
I think it's already there, George.
Oh my goodness! Hey, you're in the same group. Man. We're around the same
I'm in
age.
that group.
All right, gotcha. All right.
And the 7th one is just simply the way they communicate. You know, communication has moved to faster and faster and faster, right? So the millennials would text message, and we were trying to figure out as moms and dads how to catch up with that. And, you know, if we were going to communicate with our teenager, we better send them a text because they're not answering their phone, right? And so, but that shift is even moving now from text messaging by the millennials is morphing into iconic messaging is what we'd call it, right? They are using images and emojis and bitmojis and all this stuff. I don't even half understand all of it, George. But the reality is that it's very short, visual bits of information that their strong minds that's grown up with this know how to filter very quickly and understand that communication, and they process it all very, very, very quickly. And so they're different in that way. We're going to figure out how to communicate them in short bits and bytes in ways that they are willing to accept, because they're not reading long articles anymore.
Right.
It's just not happening, right?
Because they're texting.
Yeah. In fact, a study recently said that the Gen Z's attention span is 6 to 8 seconds on average.
I heard you say that today, and I just had to hear it.
Blew me
I just
away.
had to hear it again. 6
Blew me
to 8
away.
seconds.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Itamar from Miami, Florida. I represent Living Presence Ministry, and you're listening to CSN Podcast.
Something very important that you also went over today that I thought was important. You talked about how we're decentralizing.
Yeah, right. The millennials have grown up in a world where they've been able to access on-demand information, learning, whatever it is they need, anywhere, anytime, any place, right? They pull a device out of their pocket and they can, in a few short moments, get access to whatever they need to be able to do. And so things like Netflix, where they can watch the TV program on their own schedule and their own time, right? So it's decentralized in a sense that they didn't have to show up at the family room at a certain time when the TV show was on like we did growing up. They can do it anytime, any place they want. Same thing with like, they don't call a taxi anymore from a taxi stand. They just pull out this app called Uber or Lyft, and they just, you know, use a game-like interface to call a cab to come pick them up.
Right. You see how much things have changed. You know, like you almost tell your kids something. You say, "Hey, I was at home and I had my pajamas on, and I had those little house shoes with the little puppy ones on the end, and I took that off, put on my clothes, and went down to a Blockbuster Video, and picked out a video, stood in line, and then went back home and put my pajamas on." They will say you're lying.
Right.
Look how that's changed.
They've never had the privilege of seeing that little sticker that says "Be kind and rewind," right?
Right.
You know?
And then having to return something.
Right.
It works that way. The reason why I bring that up is that now we're next going to figure out how do we work with them to stay relevant at this time.
I give like 3 things as an encouragement to the stewardship leaders as they think about how to embrace this decentralization thing that is a trend with millennials today. The first is just needing to embrace technology to engage them outside the classroom, away from the church building.
Right, so in other words, we have to get on Snapchat.
Well, I don't know if it's Snapchat, but there's probably various ways to do that, whether it's through YouTube or it's apps or it's some sort of opportunity for them to engage on demand on their time and their place with the content that we want them to be able to get in touch with.
Right.
The second thing is to make, it kind of goes along with that, to make on-demand learning available to them. Stewardship teaching and learning on demand, and make it easily accessible, because if it's hard, they're not going to do it, right? They're accustomed to really slick apps that allow them to do some what we would call do-it-yourself learning in the online space.
You want to know something that we did at our church that kind of helped us in the area of millennials that I didn't think was going to be popular, and it was? We started doing certain classes, but we had them we asked them what they wanted to hear about. Then we started doing do-it-yourself classes. So some of them in Los Angeles were real estate orientated. And it's funny, we were running by the stewardship department, but we were bringing in contractors with it, and then we would talk to them, but then also talk to them about relationship. And then we ran them on demand, but look, they started coming down to the classes. And then also, the good part about it is they came down early, they saw how we would make mistakes or we'd have to redo it. They liked the rough part about it. In that area. It was very, very unique.
Well, we'll talk more about that, how they like the, the authenticity of the, it's not always perfect, right?
Right.
Yeah. And the third thing I'd do in this decentralization is just find ways for them to stay connected. They can, having a class and having them come together in a classroom is a good environment, is not something that's necessarily going to need to go away to address millennials, but they want to be able to stay connected. That's their lives. They live a connected lives through online and social media and those sorts of things. And that's things that we could be doing to allow them to be every day of the week connecting in with what we're doing.
Good. Hey, second to last question. What would you tell someone that is starting a ministry or their ministry wants to reach out more to millennials is just a good starting block or starting things that they would need to do?
Here's what I would do. I think oftentimes we get a bunch of us together who are the old folks doing this for a long time, and we sit around and try to guess what we think they would want us to do.
Yeah, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, here's what I think might work well, is why don't you invite a handful of millennials into a focus group environment and spend a night just asking some really good penetrating questions that allow them to dig pretty deep into some of what we're trying to learn and understand, and get from them what it might look like to be able to change and morph our stewardship ministry into something that would address their needs, right? Rather than us trying to figure that out, they're the ones that are going to tell us what it's going to look like in the future going forward, right? Excellent. And so we should engage them in some sort of focus group environment or just talk to them about it, get them involved.
Right, and have a plan and also have a social media plan as well, what you said earlier. If somebody wants to get in contact with Steve, how do they do that?
Well, you can reach me at scarter@secc.org or call me on 502-253-8022. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Good. I'm going to call you in the middle of the night. That sounds like a good number.
Well, that's in my office, so
all right,
I won't be answering it. So.
Good. Hey, this is George Thompson, your host with the Christian Stewardship Network. We're so honored today to have Steve Carter come by and share information. Also, there's more information available on our website, christianstewardshipnetwork.com. Also, if you see us on social media, like, share, and subscribe to us. Look forward to seeing you on our next episode.